The air in Blackwood Manor was thick, heavy with the unmistakable scent of dust and mold, mixed with a subtle aroma of burnt parchment and something metallic, almost rusty, which gave the place an even more sinister feel. A cold breeze whistled through the cracks in the dusty windows, making the tattered curtains sway like silent ghosts dancing in the wind. "This manor smells weird, doesn't it, Scoob?" Shaggy Parsons grumbled, clutching his best canine friend, Scooby-Doo, who grunted in agreement, his hackles raised and eyes wide with apprehension. A whisper echoed through the dark corridors, a drawn-out, guttural voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time, uttering something that sounded like Voldemort, the curse. The end, The echo seemed to vibrate in the stone walls, making the two friends' hearts race. Fred Jones, always the group strategist and the most level-headed, shone his powerful flashlight, sweeping the beam across the shapes of furniture covered in white sheets, which looked like spectral statues in the dark. "It's just the wind, guys. Or maybe Velma's reciting Gothic poetry again to set the mood," he joked, trying to hide the growing tension that hung in the air like a cold mist. Velma Dinkley, meanwhile, already had her nose buried in an old, dusty book, adjusting her thick-rimmed glasses in the process, completely absorbed in the text. "It's not poetry, Fred. I'm reading about the legend of Voldemort and the cursed object. They say that whoever touches it, or even gets too close, will be haunted by a legion of dark spirits that will torment them forever." A chill ran down Shaggy's spine, who was already as pale as a freshly seen ghost. "Dark spirits? Scooby, I think I forgot something important outside, like the exit. And we could grab some Scooby snacks before we go, you know? To have energy to run." Scooby nodded frantically, already eyeing the door, his eyes reflecting the gleam of Fred's flashlight. Daphne Blake, always the most stylish and perceptive, noticed something the others didn't see. An elongated, shapeless shadow that projected onto the right wall, unlike any shadow Fred's flashlight could create, seemed to move on its own. "Guys, did you see that?" she asked, pointing to the amorphous form that disappeared as quickly as it appeared, as if it had been a trick of light. Before anyone could answer, a louder, more thunderous voice, seemingly coming from the very floor, reverberated through the manor walls, making the old floorboards tremble. "He who invades Voldemort's legacy will know eternal darkness, and their fate will be sealed in the depths of oblivion." Scooby and Shaggy's hearts pounded to the point of almost jumping out of their chests, and a unanimous cry of "Soinks!" cut through the air as the two hugged each other in pure panic, already preparing for the inevitable chase. Was Voldemort's fearsome curse real, or was there a more human explanation for Blackwood Manor's hauntings, perhaps an ingenious villain trying to protect it? The mystery had only just begun, and the Mystery Machine Gang was about to discover that some legacies are harder to unearth than they seem, especially when there's a ghost who doesn't want to be found. The Mystery Machine, with its psychedelic paint job and dusty tires, swayed gently along the dirt road that wound through a forest of ancient oak trees. The setting sun painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, casting long, distorted shadows that made the trees look like skeletal fingers pointing towards the horizon. Inside the van, the atmosphere was as usual. Velma was absorbed in her tablet, reading about urban legends and local folklore, while Fred, at the wheel, whistled a carefree tune, his eyes fixed on the road. Daphne, sitting next to Velma, retouched her lipstick, but her curious blue eyes scanned the landscape in search of any sign of the legendary Blackwood Manor. Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, in the back seat, shared a gigantic sandwich that seemed to defy the laws of physics in terms of filling, with layers of cold cuts and cheeses piled high. The smell of mustard and fresh meat permeated the van's interior. "Fred, are you sure we're on the right track to Blackwood Manor?" Velma asked, adjusting her glasses on her nose, a crease forming on her forehead. "The GPS indicates it's this way," But the road is getting darker and darker and isolated. And this old map the professor left is so vague. Fred smiled confidently, adjusting his hand on the steering wheel. Relax, Velma. I trust my sense of direction. Besides, Professor Enoch Blackwood's old map was pretty clear, as far as an almost century-old map goes. He left a strange will, didn't he? He wants us to investigate rumors of something cursed he hid there, something connected to the legend of Voldemort. Cursed? Shaggy swallowed a giant bite of the sandwich, his eyes wide, his chin messy with mayonnaise. Like a real curse? With ghosts and things that turn you into a frog or a pillar of salt? Because if so, I'd rather be turned into a bucket of popcorn. At least it's edible. Scooby-Doo, sitting next to him, shook his head vigorously, his eyes bulging. Roar! Don't worry, guys, Daphne reassured, closing her makeup mirror and putting her lipstick back in her bag. It's probably just another case of someone trying to scare others to get something. And we're good at exposing those tricks, right? It's what we do best. Just then, a flash of lightning illuminated the imposing silhouette of Blackwood Manor in the distance, silhouetted against the stormy sky. The manor, in a gloomy Victorian style, looked like a sleeping creature, its pointed towers piercing the menacing sky like skeletal claws. Dark windows, like empty, deep eyes, stared at the forest with a taciturn expression. A cold shiver ran down Shaggy's spine, and he let out a small squeak. That house doesn't look very welcome, Fred. It looks like it's going to swallow us whole. Couldn't we investigate a mystery at a pizza place, with lots of cheese and no ghosts? Scooby let out a melancholic whine and curled up in the seat, already anticipating the scares and the inevitable chases. The mystery machine stopped in front of a rusty iron gate that seemed not to have been opened in decades, held shut by a huge moss-covered padlock. Thick, dusty vines wrapped around the stone pillars, giving the impression that nature had reclaimed the place. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the distant croaking of frogs from the nearby pond and the rustling of dry leaves under a gust of wind that seemed to come directly from the manor. "Well, it looks like we've arrived," Fred said, turning off the van's engine. "Time to solve the mystery of Blackwood Manor. Who's excited?" He looked at Scooby and Shaggy, who were hugging each other, trembling. Okay, maybe not everyone. As they got out of the van, a peculiar smell of sulfur and something sweet and putrid wafted through the air, like the scent of dead flowers mixed with a metallic, rancid odor, as if something was slowly decaying deep inside the house. A sense of oppression hung over the place, almost as if the air was heavier. When Fred pushed the gate open with an agonizing creak that echoed through the forest, a huge raven with black feathers and shiny eyes, perched on top of one of the stone pillars, took flight with a shrill, horrifying squawk, disappearing into the growing darkness of dusk. Scooby and Shaggy jumped, clinging to each other, almost falling. "What a lovely welcome," Daphne ionized, adjusting the colorful silk scarf she was wearing. "It seems the manor has its own guardians." As they approached the main door, a gust of cold wind swept across the courtyard, and a chilling whisper seemed to pass through them, carrying the words, "Outsiders, ... The legacy ... Voldemort ... will perish ... The air seemed to grow even heavier, and the kerosene lamps Fred had lit swayed precariously in his hands, their flames dancing. Velma felt a chill that wasn't from the wind, but from something more. This is strange. It feels like the house itself is alive, watching us. Shaggy, clinging to Scooby, trembled uncontrollably. "What if it's a real ghost, Velma? A real Voldemort ghost who doesn't like visitors and loves turning people into jelly?" "I don't want to be jelly." A dragging metallic sound came from inside the manor, like something heavy being dragged across the wooden floor, echoing through the interior walls. Scooby and Shaggy let out a prolonged, panicked whimper. "I don't think we're alone here," Fred said, pulling out his flashlight with determination. Come on, gang. Time to find out what's really going on. As the manor door opened with a mournful screech, revealing a dark, dusty hall with covered furniture and torn curtains, a shapeless, tall shadow seemed to move quickly down the far end of the corridor, disappearing behind one of the large stone columns supporting the ceiling. Everyone's heart skipped a beat, and a tense silence hung in the air. The mystery of Blackwood Manor was about to unfold in a way they could never have predicted, and they barely knew what awaited them in the depths of that haunted house. The first hint that something was terribly wrong had been revealed. Blackwood Manor's main hall was a labyrinth of shadows and furniture covered with white sheets, giving the impression of petrified ghosts at a forgotten banquet centuries ago. The faint light from Fred and Velma's flashlights barely managed to pierce the thick darkness, creating dancing shadows that heightened the sense of mystery and apprehension. The smell of mold and ancient cedar was strong, almost suffocating, mingling with a metallic, rancid aroma as if something was slowly decaying deep within the house. "Wow, this place is huge and incredibly spooky," Daphne exclaimed, admiring the intricate carvings on the dark wooden walls and the torn linen panels that covered the tall windows. "And it has such a strange energy. It feels like every corner hides a secret." Strange is an understatement, Daphne. I'd say terrifying, and smells like mold, and I want my mommy. Shaggy muttered, pulling at his shirt collar, his eyes scanning every corner for any hidden threat. Scooby-Doo nodded in agreement, cowering beside him, his fur bristling. Velma, meanwhile, was already kneeling near an old dresser with Gothic carvings, examining some marks on the dusty floor with a pocket magnifying glass. "Wait a second. These marks aren't from ordinary furniture casters. It looks like something heavy and irregular, perhaps some kind of box or trunk, was dragged through here recently. And look, the dust here is finer, as if someone had hastily swept something away." She pointed to a faint trail leading towards a majestic staircase, adorned with a richly carved oak banister. "Good observations, Velma. You're the best," Fred praised, illuminating the marks with his flashlight. "That means someone was here before us, or still is. And it wasn't a ghost who swept the floor. It was someone with a broom or mop, and they're trying to hide their tracks." Suddenly, a loud, dragging noise came from upstairs, accompanied by a guttural whisper that seemed to call out the name Voldemort, followed by a low, hoarse laugh that made their blood run cold. Scooby and Shaggy let out a high-pitched scream in unison and hugged each other, trembling uncontrollably, their teeth chattering. "Izoinks, what was that?" "It sounds like he's calling us for dinner, and we're the dinner." "It sounds like he's calling us for dinner, and sounds like he's calling us for dinner, and we're the dinner," Shaggy stammered, his eyes bulging. "It seems our ghost wants to play hide-and-seek, and we're not winning," Fred said with a determined smile, but with a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "Let's go upstairs, gang, and keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary, anything that isn't mold and dust." As they ascended the staircase, the wooden steps creaked under their feet, amplifying the suspense with each step, as if the manor itself was groaning. The air grew colder as they approached the second floor, and an inexplicable draft made the old painting sway. In the dark, labyrinthine corridors, dusty portraits of ancient Blackwood ancestors seemed to follow them with their eyes, their grim, severe expressions heightening the feeling of being watched. "Look!" Daphne exclaimed, pointing to a half-open door at the end of the corridor, from which a faint flickering light seemed to emanate. "It looks like someone left a light on, or turned one on in there." Fred, cautiously, pushed the door open. It was a gigantic library, filled with shelves overflowing with ancient books, many of them moldy and decaying from time. The smell of aged paper, ink, and leather was strong, mixed with a peculiar odor of burnt candles. In the center of the room, an oak table was covered with yellowed papers torn maps, and strange objects, such as a raven's skull and a darkened silver medallion with runic symbols. Velma approached the table, her eyes eagerly scanning the documents. Incredible! These are Professor Blackwood's diaries. He was obsessed with the legend of Voldemort and an artifact called the Eye of Erebus. He believed Voldemort was an ancient sorcerer, but the writings suggest that Voldemort could be a title, not a proper name. Eye of Erebus? That's a scary name. Sounds like an alien monster. Scooby yelped, hiding his face behind Shaggy, who was already pale. Shaggy swallowed hard, his eyes wide at the raven's skull. I bet it's some kind of cursed jewel that turns people into into giant cheese-eating worms. Or worse, into ghosts that smell like stale cheese. Daphne, meanwhile, noticed something odd on one of the nearest bookshelves. Fred, look at this. The books on this shelf seem to be out of order, and some are even upside down. And there's a different kind of dust here, finer and shinier, as if someone had hastily brushed something away to hide a clue, and it's not old dust. Fred examined the shelf carefully. Good observation, Daphne. It looks like someone was looking for something specific, and in a hurry. Or maybe they were trying to hide something. And this shiny dust, it's almost like glitter, but a grayish hue. While Velma continued to read the diaries, Scooby and Shaggy, always looking for a snack or a distraction from fear, sniffed a scent that seemed to come from behind a massive bookshelf. Rations? Scooby asked hopefully, his eyes gleaming. Shaggy followed him, sniffing the air. I don't think so, Scoob, but I smell burnt popcorn and a bit of blue. That doesn't make sense in such an old, dusty mansion. Curious, they pushed the bookshelf, which rotated on a hidden pivot with a soft creak, revealing a dark, narrow, secret passage that led deep into the manor. A startled scream erupted from the two friends, who tumbled over each other in a pile of legs and fur. A secret passage, Fred exclaimed, illuminating the passage with his flashlight. This is getting interesting. Professor Blackwood really was a master of hiding places. From inside the passage, a cold wind blew, and a dragging sound of heavy footsteps echoed, as if something was approaching rapidly. The library lights began to flicker frantically, and a dark, shapeless form, resembling a hooded, ethereal figure, appeared for an instant at the passage entrance, before disappearing back into the shadows, accompanied by a whisper. "He's here," Velma whispered, her voice tense, her glasses slipping slightly down her nose. The ghost of Voldemort. And he didn't like being discovered. Fred gripped his flashlight tightly. Don't worry, Velma. Whatever it is, we'll find out. But the air in the library suddenly grew colder, and a louder, more menacing whisper, almost a muffled roar, filled the room. You should not have come. The Eye of Erebus belongs to the darkness, and those who seek its secrets will know eternal torment. The group exchanged glances, knowing that the investigation was only just beginning to delve into a much more sinister and elaborate mystery than they had imagined. The first major clue had been discovered, and the cat-and-mouse game had begun. With the discovery of the secret passage and the menacing appearance of the hooded figure, the tension in Blackwood Manor intensified to almost unbearable levels. The metallic, putrid smell grew stronger, hanging like a veil over them. Fred, flashlight in hand, looked into the darkness of the passage with an expression of determination, but also caution. It seems our ghost friend wanted to give us a private tour of his secret domains. What do you think, team? Shall we explore the tunnel? Velma, still flipping through Professor Blackwood's diaries with agility, murmured, According to the writings, the Eye of Erebus is hidden in a secret chamber, accessible only through hidden passages. This could be the main entrance or one of several. But the professor was a master of gadgets and tricks. We need to be careful. Great. More dark, cobweb-filled, moldy-smelling, mysterious corridors, exclaimed Shaggy, who was already starting to turn green, his teeth visibly chattering. What if it's a trap, Fred? What if Voldemort's ghost is waiting inside with ... with an army of giant vampire bats that love to eat live hot dogs? Scooby-Doo, who was leaning against Shaggy's legs, let out an anxious bark, his ears drooping and eyes wide with fear. Daphne, always practical and thinking about safety, suggested, "We need a plan before we venture in. We can't just blindly enter. What if we split up? One group in the passage, and another investigating the library for more clues. Perhaps the diaries will reveal something more specific about the location of the Eye of Erebus." Fred pondered, scratching his chin. "Good idea, Daphne. It's tempting. But I think it's better if we all go together. Whatever is in here is big enough and smart enough to scare Scooby and Shaggy half to death." He shot a meaningful glance at the two, who cowered even further, confirming his theory. "Let's try to stick together and warn each other of any danger. Safety first." Velma closed the diary with a soft thud. "I agree. And I found something even more interesting here. Professor Blackwood mentions a series of complex riddles and puzzles that protect the Eye of Erebus. If that's what the ghost is looking for, he needs the key to solve them. And that key, I suspect, is somewhere here in the library." And there's a diagram of a strange panel with ancient symbols. As they prepared to enter the secret passage, a loud crashing sound of something breaking came from downstairs, followed by a muffled scream and a prolonged moan. The sound reverberated through the manor walls, making it even more sinister. "What was that? It sounds like a monster just had lunch," exclaimed Shaggy, jumping and almost knocking Velma over. "It looks like someone else decided to visit the manor, or our ghost is angry and breaking things," Fred said, narrowing his eyes, his posture tense. And the noise came from the kitchen. The decision was immediate. They ran down the stairs quickly, with Scooby and Shaggy stumbling over each other in their desperate hurry, almost falling with each creaking step. On the main floor, the kitchen door was wide open, revealing a scene of chaos. Broken crockery scattered across the tiled floor, an overturned chair, and a bowl of rotten fruit thrown into the corner. The smell of burnt popcorn was even stronger now, mixed with a faint odor of frying. "Burnt popcorn again?" Daphne asked, curious, examining the scene. "And frying? That's very specific for a ghost, don't you think? Ghosts usually don't eat popcorn." "Exactly," Velma exclaimed, kneeling to examine the shards. "And these marks on the floor? They look like work boots with thick, worn soles, not a floating specter. And look, there's a remnant of fabric caught here on the edge of the table. It looks like a thick, dark fabric." Suddenly, the kitchen door slammed shut with a violent bang, and a tall, slender figure, cloaked in black and with a hood completely concealing its face, appeared in the doorway. Its eyes glowed with a sinister reddish light in the dark, like incandescent embers. The figure said nothing, just extended a bony, gloved hand towards them, and a hissing sound, almost a chilling whistle, echoed in the air, like the sound of a giant snake. "That's the Voldemort!" Scooby and Shaggy screamed in unison, their voices blending in a chorus of terror. And before anyone could stop them, they ran in opposite directions, disappearing into different corridors of the manor, looking for any place to hide. "Scooby, Shaggy, come back here. Don't split up," Fred shouted, trying to reach them, but the hooded figure advanced rapidly, blocking his path. Daphne, seeing the imminent danger and the figure's surprising speed, grabbed an ancient Chinese porcelain vase from a side table and, with a swift, precise blow, threw it at the figure. The vase shattered into 1,000 pieces upon hitting the figure's chest, but it didn't even flinch, didn't even seem to feel the impact, just continued advancing, its eyes glowing more intensely as if enraged. Velma, taking advantage of the distraction and Daphne's daring, ran to a bookshelf at the hall's entrance and, with a quick movement, pulled out a thick volume titled History of Cursed Mansions, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside, There was a small, silvery metal object with strange engravings and a soft glow. Fred, Daphne. I found the key Professor Blackwood mentioned. It might be the key to solving the riddles of the Eye of Erebus and getting rid of this ... ghost. The hooded figure let out a low, grim roar, mixed with a grinding sound, and, with surprising agility, leaped over an overturned chair, blocking Fred and Daphne's path to Velma. The confrontation was becoming increasingly real and personal. With Scooby and Shaggy lost somewhere in the manor, and the mysterious figure getting closer, Fred knew he had to act fast and come up with a definitive solution. We had to set a trap, and fast. We won't last long in this chase. He shouted to Velma and Daphne as he dodged an attack from the figure, which tried to grab him with its gloved hands. The cat-and-mouse game in Blackwood Manor was about to reach its climax, and their next move would be crucial. With the hooded figure lurking and Scooby and Shaggy lost somewhere in the mansion, the remaining team knew that time was of the essence. The smell of sulfur and burnt popcorn intensified, indicating the ghost's proximity. Fred, with his analytical mind working at full speed, immediately began to devise a trap plan. Okay, team, listen up. We need a trap that's effective enough to capture our ghost, but that also won't hurt anyone, in case it's just someone trying to scare us. Velma, the key you found. Does it fit anything here? We need more information about the Eye of Erebus. Velma, panting, examined the metal object with Professor Blackwood's tablet beside her, comparing the images. Yes, it's a complex puzzle device. Professor Blackwood's diaries mentioned that he used a series of levers, counterweights, and light beams to conceal the Eye of Erebus. If we can activate the correct sequence using this key, the object should reveal itself. And he also talks about a secret compartment activated by weight. Excellent. That gives us a significant advantage, Fred said, his eyes scanning the main hall, which seemed to become a labyrinth of shadows and opportunities. Daphne, have you noticed anything we can use? Something that could attract or trap our ghost long enough. Something heavy enough to activate a counterweight. Daphne, with her keen perception and sharp eye for detail, pointed to a giant wrought iron chandelier that hung precariously from the ceiling in the center of the hall, held by a thick, rusty chain. Fred, what if we use the chandelier? It seems to be on a pulley that's a bit loose. We could release it to create a huge sound distraction, or even use it to trap the figure if we can control the fall. And look at those heavy dark velvet curtains there. We can make an improvised net. Brilliant, Daphne. Your vision is impressive. Fred exclaimed, a sparkle of excitement in his eyes. Velma, can you decipher the key and the device while Daphne and I prepare the chandelier and curtain trap? We need to be quick and silent before the ghost finds us again. While Velma focused on the key and the diaries, deciphering the ancient symbols and complex diagrams, Fred and Daphne ran to the chandelier. Fred climbed onto an unstable chair, inspecting the pulley mechanism and the chain's anchor point, while Daphne, with her agility and surprising strength, grabbed the heavy velvet curtains and began to tie them firmly with some of Fred's belts and pieces of rope she found in an old toolbox, forming a kind of improvised but sturdy net. I think if I cut the main rope here, the chandelier will fall, but not enough to hit the floor completely. It will stop a few feet short, making a huge noise, Fred explained, adjusting the rope and testing its strength. It's going to make a deafening clang, and if the figure is underneath, it will be completely disoriented. That's our moment. As they worked with almost perfect synchronicity, a scratching sound and hurried footsteps came from one of the side corridors. It was Scooby and Shaggy, who emerged breathless and covered in cobwebs, their eyes wide with fear. Fred, Daphne, Velma, we were trying to run from the ghost, but he's everywhere. He has a weird smell of stale cheese and ... and disinfectant. Shaggy shouted, pointing behind them with a trembling hand. He's really fast. He almost got us. Scooby barked in agreement, still panting, and hid behind Shaggy, who in turn hid behind Fred. Stale cheese and disinfectant? Fred repeated, frowning. That's a very interesting clue, Shaggy. Great job, you two. Listen, guys, we need your help for the trap. Scooby, Shaggy, I want you to grab one of those old white sheets and hide behind the statue over there in the corner. When I give the signal, you jump out and make as much noise as you can to distract the figure and make it go to the center of the hall. Shaggy swallowed hard, looking at the giant chandelier. Distract? With a stale cheese and disinfectant ghost? We might have to change the mystery machine's name to Extreme Fear Machine Fred. What if he's not scared and comes after us? It'll be quick, I promise. And you two are masters at causing distractions. Fred reassured, gently pushing them behind the covered statue that looked like a ghost. I'm counting on you. And remember, think of Scooby snacks. Scooby and Shaggy reluctantly hid behind a covered statue, their eyes peeking out through holes in the sheet, filled with fear. Suddenly, the hooded figure reappeared at the entrance of the main hall, its eyes glowing with even greater intensity, sweeping the room with an aura of menace. It seemed to be looking for something or someone, and its movements were quick and silent. Now, Fred whispered to Velma. When the figure is under the chandelier, Velma, activate the key on the panel you found. Daphne, prepare the net. Scooby, Shaggy on my signal. The figure advanced slowly, its footsteps silent, as if floating over the dusty floor, going directly to the center of the hall, right under the giant chandelier. It seemed the bait had worked. Now, Fred shouted, cutting the chandelier's safety rope with his multi-tool knife. With a loud metallic screech, the chandelier began to plummet rapidly, stopping a few inches from the floor with a deafening thud that shook the entire manor. At the same time, Scooby and Shaggy, with a zoinks that echoed throughout the hall, jumped out from behind the statue, waving the white sheet and making strange, spooky sounds. The figure, disoriented by the noise and the impact of the chandelier, recoiled a step, stunned. Daphne, the net! Fred exclaimed, pointing to the figure. Daphne, with a quick and precise movement, threw the curtain net, which opened in the air and fell over the figure, trapping it momentarily. But to everyone's surprise, the figure let out a roar of fury and frustration, and with unexpected strength, began to struggle violently, and the net began to tear with the effort, the knots unraveling. It can't be, Velma exclaimed, seeing the figure almost free. The trap isn't holding. He's stronger than we thought. The hooded figure was almost free, and panic began to grip the group. Had Fred's meticulously planned trap failed? Was Voldemort's ghost stronger and smarter than they had imagined? Suspense hung in the air, thick and palpable, and they knew that the final confrontation was inevitable, and that their next move would decide their fate in Blackwood Manor. The hooded figure, with a guttural scream that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, tore through the last restraints of Daphne's curtain net, revealing itself to be even more menacing and with an aura of rage. The hood, however, still concealed its face, maintaining the mystery of its true identity. But now, with its arms free, its movements were even quicker and more aggressive. You'll pay for this. No one stops me. A distorted, echoing, metallic voice reverberated through the hall, seemingly coming from a hidden megaphone. He doesn't look happy, and he has an echo. That's super spooky. Shaggy yelped, clutching Scooby-Doo so tightly that the dog let out a ruff and trembled like a raspberry jelly in an earthquake. Fred, realizing that the chandelier trap hadn't been enough to contain the ghost, quickly changed tactics, his mind already formulating a new plan. Velma, have you managed to decipher the key and the device? We need the eye of her best to understand what's really going on and unmask this villain once and for all. I'm almost there, Velma replied, still working frantically on the device, which now emitted a pulsing glow. The diaries mention that it's activated by specific light and sound, and also by pressure at an exact point. There's a diagram here that points to the exact center of the hall. The figure, now free and with renewed momentum, advanced rapidly towards Velma, seeming determined to prevent her from completing the task, its fists clenched. "You won't have Voldemort's power. This legacy is mine. We don't want any power, mister. We just want to go eat a huge pizza with everything on it. And some Scooby snacks." Scooby barked, running in nervous circles, almost tripping over his own feet. Daphne, seeing the imminent danger to Velma and the figure's proximity, acted purely on instinct and with a dose of courage. There was a huge, heavy Persian rug on the floor near the figure. With a swift and surprising pull, using all her strength, she yanked the rug, causing the figure to lose its balance and stumble backward, tripping and falling with a dull thud. "Stay away from my friend, Voldemort, or whoever you are. You're not getting past me." This gave Velma precious seconds to continue her work. She positioned the key into a small hole in the device and turned it precisely, following the diary's instructions. A soft click was heard, and a blue beam of light emerged from the object, pointing to one of the bookshelves in the library, exactly at the location indicated by the holographic map. "Eureka! The key worked, and it points to the secret bookshelf we discovered earlier," Velma exclaimed, standing up and pointing to the light beam dancing on the ceiling. "The Eye of Erebus was guiding us all along." The hooded figure quickly recovered from the fall and, with astonishing speed, began to pursue them through the hall again with renewed fury. The chase was both hilarious and tense at the same time. Scooby and Shaggy, in a moment of coordinated pure panic, ran between the figure's legs, causing it to trip over an ancient potted plant. The vase broke, and the smell of wet soil mingled with the stale cheese and disinfectant odor emanating from the figure. Fred, seizing the golden opportunity, shouted to Scooby and Shaggy, "You two are geniuses. Now to the secret passage. Lure the figure there. But don't go in, just draw it in." The two friends, surprisingly, understood the plan with unusual quickness, driven by fear, with a rough. Scooby barked and, along with Shaggy, ran towards the secret passage they had discovered in Chapter 2, making noises and waving to attract the figure's attention. The figure, furious and blind with rage, followed them blindly, determined to catch them. As the figure passed through the entrance of the secret passage, Fred and Daphne acted in unison. Fred pulled a rope he had tied at the top of the passage earlier, and Daphne, with a precise leap and using her agility, pushed a massive bookshelf that was strategically positioned outside the passage. The bookshelf rotated and the secret stone door slammed shut with a loud, muffled bang, trapping the figure inside the dark passage. A scream of fury and frustration came from inside, echoing through the passage walls. "You can't stop me. I'm Voldemort. The curse is real. You fell into my trap." Velma, with a triumphant smile and breathless, finally approached the secret door and opened a small inspection hatch. Through it, they could see the figure struggling, completely trapped. Voldemort. How cliché, isn't it, guys? And the curse? Time to unmask our villain and reveal who's behind all this charade. Fred, with a firm, determined tug, yanked the hood off the figure, revealing not an ancient spirit, but a middle-aged man with thick glasses, a scraggly gray beard, and, to no one's surprise, a strong, unmistakable smell of stale cheese, mixed with odors of cleaning products and glue. It was Dr. Alastair P. Piddles, an eccentric historian and Voldemort expert, who had been seen lurking around the manor before they arrived, and whom Velma had researched. Velma adjusted her glasses, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of discovery. "Ladies and gentlemen, our Voldemort ghost is none other than Dr. Alastair P. Piddles. And all the clues fit perfectly. The smell of stale cheese? Dr. Piddles is known for his passion for exotic cheeses, And he always carries some pieces in his pockets for emergencies or for investigative snacks, as he calls them. The drag marks on the floor, those were from him moving the heavy furniture to create a path to the secret passage without raising suspicion. The whispers and scary noises, he was using a voice recorder with echo effects and a hidden sound system, perhaps with speakers hidden in the walls, to amplify the voices and spooky sounds. Fred nodded, proud of the team's work. And the moving shadows and the hooded figure? He was using a projector and a simple, but effective, pulley system to create the illusions, all to scare us away from the manor, leaving the treasure for him. And his speed? He probably had wheels on his feet, or was very agile for his age. Daphne smiled, crossing her arms. And the burnt popcorn? He was probably so busy with the staging and so afraid of getting caught that he forgot his snack. And the smell of disinfectant was his attempt to mask the strong cheese smell. Dr. Piddles, now unmasked and with an expression of utter frustration, huffed. And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids and that dog, and for this smell. I love stale cheese. It's the cheese of geniuses. But yes, it was me. I had to scare you away to get the professor's treasure all to myself. Scooby-Doo and Shaggy laughed, relieved, and Scooby even licked Shaggy's face in celebration. The mystery was solved, and Blackwood Manor had finally revealed its secrets, all of them very human and with a hint of cheese. Dr. Alastair P. Piddles, now sitting in a chair in Blackwood Manor, loosely tied by one of Fred's trap ropes, looking more like a grumpy, frustrated old man than a fearsome ghost, finally revealed his plan with a defeated sigh. The smell of stale cheese still lingered in the library air, mixed with the aroma of mold and ancient paper, to everyone's disgust, except for Scooby-Doo, who occasionally sniffed the air with a certain interest, wagging his tail. "Well, I admit it," he grumbled, adjusting his glasses on his nose, as the Mystery Machine team watched. "I wanted the Eye of Erebus. It's not a cursed artifact, as the legends say. It's an ultra-rare locating device. Professor Blackwood, an old colleague of mine, and a tremendous eccentric with a peculiar taste for puzzles, always hid his most valuable inventions in unusual places and protected them with riddles. I knew he had hidden the Eye of Erebus here, and with this silly Voldemort legend, I thought I could scare anyone who came near. A perfect smokescreen." Velma, with a satisfied smile, explained didactically to the group and to Dr. Piddles, who still seemed not to have fully grasped the extent of his discovery. Professor Blackwood actually used the Voldemort legend as an ingenious distraction. The Eye of Erebus isn't magical, but rather a complex system of lenses, mirrors, and a special quartz crystal that, when activated correctly with the key, which is actually a projection device that amplifies light, projects a hidden treasure map. Not a treasure of gold, but of the professor's inventions. He liked to leave final enigmas to test the intelligence of whoever found it. She pointed to a blue beam of light that now illuminated a specific spot on the ceiling, revealing a series of numerical coordinates, astrological symbols, and a small wooden chest hidden in a wall crevice, carefully camouflaged. And Dr. Piddles tried to use that same legend to get the map and the inventions all to himself, didn't he? Fred completed, shaking his head in disapproval. The strange sounds, the shadows, and the hooded figure, all to simulate the ghost of Voldemort and scare away curious people like us. He even used a megaphone to distort his voice and projectors for the dancing shadows. Daphne smiled, crossing her arms, her eyes gleaming. And the funniest thing is that his cheese smell was one of the biggest clues. No ghost I know carries cheese around, unless he's the ghost of a traveling dairy. And the smell of disinfectant was his attempt to hide the strong cheese smell, which only made it more obvious. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, who were sitting on the floor, eating a cheese sandwich that Fred had found and prepared, laughed loudly. "That's true, Daphne," Shaggy said, his mouth full of sandwich and crumbs. Unless he's the ghost of a giant rat who loves cheese, right, Scoob? But then, he'd be cute. Scooby-Doo let out a ruff, and playfully slapped Shaggy's leg, laughing even harder and wagging his tail vigorously. And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids and that dog. Dr. Piddles grumbled, repeating the classic villain's line with a tone that mixed anger and resignation. And for this passion of mine for cheese, I'll never bring cheese to a mystery again. It's a weakness. With the mystery solved and Dr. Piddles unmasked, the atmosphere in Blackwood Manor shifted from gloomy to relaxed and even a little amusing. The local police, who were already on their way after Fred's call, arrived to take Dr. Piddles into custody, promising to investigate Professor Blackwood's inventions. Well, another case solved and another ghost unmasked, said Fred, looking around the manor, which now seemed less menacing. And we discovered that the real treasure wasn't a curse, but a map to Professor Blackwood's knowledge and innovation. Daphne sighed contentedly, tossing her hair back. Yes, now we can go home and relax. Maybe watch a horror movie, for a change, but no smelly cheese ghosts. As long as there are no ghosts that smell like stale cheese and disinfectant. And that there are lots of Scooby snacks, Shaggy exclaimed, making Scooby laugh and nod. As the mystery machine left Blackwood Manor, leaving behind the solved mystery, Dr. Piddles, and the peculiar smell of cheese in the air, Scooby-Doo, in the back seat, shot a look at Shaggy. Shaggy, cheese. He pointed to the rest of the sandwich in his friend's hand. Shaggy smiled and offered a generous piece to his best friend, who eagerly gobbled it down. Of course, Scoob. After all, some cheeses are scary, but others are simply delicious. And how about one last Scooby snack to celebrate? And the two laughed, ready for the next adventure, no matter how mysterious, spooky, or tasty it might be, as long as they had some snacks along the way.